Before we begin, take a moment to make yourself comfortable. Dim the lights if you can. Set your phone down or let it rest gently beside you. Maybe loosen your shoulders just a little. You don't need to focus too hard on the details tonight. This isn't a test. It's not a lecture. It's simply a slow walk through one of the strangest, most dramatic and oddly comforting mythologies ever imagined, Greek mythology. A world where gods behave badly. Heroes make questionable decisions. And fate has a habit of showing up uninvited. If you drift off at any point, that's perfectly fine. The gods won't mind. They're used to being ignored. Now, let's begin. Long before history was written down, before philosophers debated in marble halls, before anyone worried about taxes or alarm clocks, the ancient Greeks looked up at the sky and wondered who, or what, was really in charge. Thunder didn't just happen. Storms weren't random. The sun didn't rise by accident. Someone had to be responsible. And so, slowly, over generations of storytelling, the Greek gods were born. Not as distant, perfect beings, but as reflections of humanity itself. Powerful, yes. Immortal, certainly. But also jealous, petty, impulsive, and deeply emotional. In other words, very human. At the very beginning of everything there was chaos. Not chaos in the modern sense of noise and confusion, but a vast, empty nothing. No sky. No earth. No time. Just potential. From this emptiness emerged Gaia, the earth itself. Solid, steady, and endlessly patient. Gaia didn't arrive alone for long. Soon came Uranus, the sky, who stretched himself endlessly above her. Together, earth and sky created the first generation of divine beings known as the Titans. Now, if you imagine the Titans as noble, wise ancestors, you might want to adjust your expectations. Uranus, for instance, turned out to be a pretty terrible father. He despised some of his own children so much that he imprisoned them deep within Gaia's body, forcing them back into the earth. This did not make Gaia happy. In fact, it made her furious. And when a primordial goddess gets angry, things tend to escalate. Gaia devised a plan. She crafted a sickle from flint and asked her Titan sons if any of them would stand up to their father. Most refused. Challenging the sky itself is a big ask. But one Titan stepped forward, Cronus. Cronus ambushed Uranus and overthrew him in a moment that was dramatic, symbolic, and extremely unpleasant. Greek mythology does not shy away from uncomfortable imagery, even early on. With Uranus defeated, Cronus became ruler of the cosmos. And for a while things seemed stable. This era became known as the Golden Age, a time when humans lived peacefully without labor or suffering. No wars. No famine. No endless email notifications. Just quiet existence. But if Greek myths teach us anything, it's this. Stability never lasts. Cronus, like his father before him, received a prophecy. One of his own children would overthrow him. And Cronus did what many mythological rulers do when faced with inconvenient predictions. He panicked. Instead of, say, working on his parenting skills, Cronus chose a more direct solution. Every time his wife Rhea gave birth, Cronus swallowed the child whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Down they went. Immortal, yes, but trapped inside their father. Rhea, understandably, was not thrilled. When she became pregnant again, she decided enough was enough. This child would be saved. When the baby was born, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and handed it to Cronus, who swallowed it without a second thought. Apparently he wasn't big on checking. The baby, Zeus, was hidden away on the island of Crete. There, nymphs cared for him and warriors clashed their shields together whenever he cried, so Cronus wouldn't hear. Zeus grew up strong, clever, and very aware of his family situation. Eventually he returned. With help from the goddess Métis, Zeus gave Cronus a potion that forced him to regurgitate his swallowed children. Fully grown, very angry, and ready for revenge. What followed was the Titanomachy, a war between the old gods and the new. It lasted 10 years. Mountains were thrown. The earth shook. The sky burned. Eventually, Zeus and his siblings emerged victorious. Cronus and most of the Titans were cast into Tartarus, a deep, shadowy prison beneath the underworld. And just like that, a new divine order was established. Zeus became king of the gods. Poseidon claimed the seas. Hades ruled the underworld. And Mount Olympus became the center of divine life. Now this sounds like the end of the story. But in Greek mythology, it's really just the beginning. Zeus, ruler of the gods, was powerful beyond measure. He controlled the sky. He commanded thunder and lightning. But perhaps his most defining trait was not his authority. It was his enthusiasm. Zeus fell in love easily. Frequently. and rarely responsibly. He married Hera, goddess of marriage, which, given his behavior, feels a bit ironic. Hera was regal, proud, and fiercely protective of her position as queen of the gods. She was also, quite understandably, often furious. Zeus had a habit of pursuing goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women alike, often disguising himself as animals, mist, or even other people. The resulting family tree is complicated. From these unions came many of Greek mythology's most famous figures. Athena, born fully armored from Zeus's head. Apollo and Artemis, twins of light and the hunt. Ares, god of war. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith. Each god and goddess had their own domain, their own personality, and their own grudges. And they were not shy about involving humans in their disputes. The Greeks believed the gods were always watching, listening, judging. A careless boast, a forgotten offering, a moment of pride. Any of these could attract divine attention. Sometimes that attention came as a blessing. Often, it did not. Take Prometheus, for example. A titan who sided with Zeus during the war, Prometheus was known for his intelligence and sympathy for humanity. When Zeus decided humans didn't deserve fire, Prometheus disagreed. So he stole fire from Olympus and gave it to mankind. Fire meant warmth, protection, progress. Zeus was not amused. As punishment, Prometheus was chained to a mountain, where an eagle came every day to eat his liver, only for it to grow back overnight. Eternal punishment with no weekends off. Humans, meanwhile, received their own punishment. Zeus ordered the creation of Pandora, the first woman, given a beautiful jar filled with all the world's evils. When Pandora opened it, sickness, sorrow, and hardship escaped into the world. Only one thing remained inside: hope. Now, let's slow things down just a little. Take a breath. Greek mythology isn't meant to be rushed. It's a collection of stories told by firelight, passed down in soft voices, meant to linger. And as the gods settled into their roles, humanity entered an age shaped by divine moods and heroic ambition. This was the age of heroes. Not perfect heroes. Not quiet ones. But flawed, determined figures whose lives were shaped by prophecy, pride, and impossible odds. One of the earliest was Perseus. Born to Danae and Zeus, Perseus grew up unaware of his divine heritage. A prophecy claimed he would kill his grandfather, King Acrisius. Naturally, Acrisius tried to avoid this by locking Danae away, which, as Greek myths repeatedly demonstrate, does not stop Zeus. Perseus would eventually be sent on a near-impossible task, to slay Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. Another hero, Heracles, known to Romans as Hercules, was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman. From the moment he was born, Hera despised him. She sent madness upon him, causing him to kill his own family. When clarity returned, Heracles was devastated. To atone, he was given 12 labors, tasks designed to be impossible. Slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the golden hind, cleaning the Augean stables. Each labor tested not just strength but endurance, and through it all, Heracles remained deeply human, prone to anger, sorrow, and exhaustion. He was strong, but he was never at peace. Now let's gently shift our focus, away from heroes, and toward kings. Because Greek mythology also loved its rulers, especially when they made terrible decisions. And there were many. With help from Athena and Hermes, Perseus succeeded, using a mirrored shield to avoid Medusa's stare. He rescued Andromeda, founded kingdoms, and yes, fulfilled the prophecy anyway. Greek mythology has strong opinions about fate. You can try to avoid it. You can run from it. But fate is patient. If you're still awake, just let the story carry you. And if you've drifted a little, that's perfectly fine too. Greek mythology has been told for thousands of years to people half listening by firelight. Tonight is no different. Now, let's gently return to the world of kings. Because while heroes battled monsters and gods argued in the clouds, mortal rulers were quietly making choices that would echo for generations. One of the most famous royal families in Greek mythology ruled the city of Thebes. And like many mythological dynasties, their story begins with a prophecy that absolutely no one handles well. The city of Thebes was founded by Cadmus, a man who followed a cow across the countryside because an oracle told him to. That alone sets the tone. Cadmus slew a dragon sacred to Ares, sowed its teeth into the ground, and watched armed warriors rise from the earth. These men became the first citizens of Thebes. Right from the beginning, the city was built on blood, magic, and questionable decision-making. Generations later came King Laius. Laius received a prophecy that his own son would kill him and marry his wife. Naturally, when his son was born, Laius ordered the baby to be abandoned on a mountainside. But fate once again was not impressed. The child survived. He was raised by another royal family and named Oedipus. Years later, Oedipus heard a prophecy of his own, that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Trying to avoid this, he fled the people he believed were his parents. On the road, he argued with a stranger at a crossroads. The argument turned violent. The stranger died. That stranger was King Laius. Oedipus continued on to Thebes, where the city was plagued by the Sphinx, a creature who asked riddles and devoured those who failed to answer. Oedipus solved the riddle. The city celebrated. And as a reward, Oedipus married the widowed queen. Yes, his mother. The truth emerged years later, unraveling the royal family completely. Oedipus blinded himself. His wife and mother took her own life. And their children inherited a legacy soaked in tragedy. Greek myths loved these stories not because they were shocking, but because they felt inevitable. Fate always finds a way. Now let's soften our pace again. Not every myth is quite so heavy. Some are quietly strange. Like the story of King Midas. Midas once did a kindness for a companion of the god Dionysus. As a reward he was granted a wish. Midas wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. At first it was delightful. Branches shimmered. Stones gleamed, then he tried to eat. Gold bread. Gold wine. And when he touched his daughter, she too turned to gold. The wish became a curse. Eventually Midas begged to be freed from it. Greek mythology had a clear message about excess. Wanting more than you need rarely ends well. Now, let's drift back toward the gods. Because while mortals struggled below, Olympus remained lively. The gods argued. They fell in love. They held grudges for centuries. Take Athena, goddess of wisdom. Calm, strategic, measured. And yet, she once turned a woman named Arachne into a spider for boasting that her weaving was better than Athena's. Probably was. The gods, you see, valued respect above fairness. Apollo, god of music and prophecy, fell in love often, and unhappily. When the nymph Daphne fled from him, she prayed for escape and was transformed into a laurel tree. Apollo honored her by wearing laurel leaves forever. Which is poetic if a bit unsettling. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, valued independence and solitude. She punished those who violated her privacy swiftly and without hesitation. One hunter, Actaeon, accidentally saw her bathing. She turned him into a stag. His own hunting dogs tore him apart. Greek myths are not subtle. Now let's gently shift again. Toward a war. A long one. A war that would become the centerpiece of Greek legend. The Trojan War. It began, as many problems do, with a disagreement at a wedding. A goddess named Eris, spirit of discord, was not invited. In response, she tossed a golden apple labeled, "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it. They asked Paris, a Trojan prince, to judge. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised power. Athena promised wisdom and victory. Aphrodite promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. The woman was Helen. She was already married. Her husband was Menelaus, king of Sparta. And so the Greeks gathered their armies. For 10 long years they fought outside the walls of Troy. Heroes clashed. Gods took sides. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, fought with unmatched skill and unstoppable pride. When his companion Patroclus was killed, Achilles returned to battle in a rage that shook the earth. He defeated Hector, Troy's greatest defender. Eventually the Greeks resorted to deception. The Trojan horse. The city fell. And with it, the old heroic age faded. The war left scars on everyone involved. Especially on Odysseus, whose journey home would take another 10 years. But that is a story that unfolds slowly. Perfectly suited for a quiet night that if your breathing has slowed, that's a good sign. You don't need to picture every scene clearly. Just let the words drift by, like waves on a quiet shore. Now, let's follow one man who spent many years doing exactly that. After the fall of Troy, Odysseus, king of Ithaca, set sail for home. The journey should have taken weeks. It took 10 years. Not because Odysseus was lost, but because the world, the gods, and fate itself seemed determined to keep him wandering. Odysseus was clever. Very clever. And in Greek mythology, cleverness is both a gift and a problem. Soon after leaving Troy, Odysseus and his men landed on the island of the Cyclades. Instead of resting quietly, they raided the town. They celebrated too long. The Cyclades returned with reinforcements. Many of Odysseus's men died. It was the first reminder that victory does not make one invincible. Next came the island of the lotus eaters. The inhabitants offered a sweet fruit that caused forgetfulness. Those who ate it no longer wished to return home. They forgot their past, their goals, even their names. Odysseus had to drag his men back to the ships by force. In Greek myths, forgetting who you are is often more dangerous than any monster. And monsters were coming. On another island lived Polyphemus, a cyclops, a giant with a single eye. Odysseus and his men became trapped in the Cyclops' cave. Polyphemus ate several of them, which was rude. Odysseus devised a plan. He told Polyphemus his name was Nobody. After blinding the Cyclops, Odysseus and his men escaped beneath the bellies of sheep. When Polyphemus cried for help, he shouted that nobody had heard him. No one came. Cleverness saved them. But pride followed. As Odysseus sailed away, he revealed his true name. Polyphemus prayed to his father, Poseidon, god of the sea. Poseidon listened. And from that moment on, the ocean itself turned against Odysseus. Storms battered his ships. Winds pushed him off course. Every step toward home came with resistance. Odysseus reached the island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. Aeolus gifted him a bag containing all the unfavorable winds, leaving only a gentle breeze to carry him home. But Odysseus's crew, curious and tired, opened the bag while he slept. The winds escaped. The ships were blown back across the sea. Sometimes, Greek myths suggest that not all obstacles come from gods. Some come from exhaustion and mistrust. Next came the enchantress Circe. She turned Odysseus's men into pigs, which, in Greek mythology, happens more often than you might expect. With help from Hermes, Odysseus resisted her magic. Circe eventually restored his men and offered guidance instead of harm. She warned him of dangers ahead. Sirens, monsters, choices with no perfect outcome. The sirens sang songs so beautiful they lured sailors to their deaths. Odysseus wanted to hear them. So he plugged his crew's ears with wax and tied himself to the mast. He listened. He begged to be released. They ignored him. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when not to listen. Then came Scylla and Charybdis. A six-headed monster on one side, a deadly whirlpool on the other. Odysseus chose Scylla. He lost men but not the ship. Greek mythology rarely offers painless options. Eventually, Odysseus reached the island of Calypso, a nymph who fell in love with him. She offered immortality, eternal youth, a life without pain. Odysseus refused. He wanted home. He wanted his wife, Penelope, who waited faithfully in Ithaca. 10 years passed. Penelope endured suitors who consumed her home and demanded she choose a new husband. She delayed them with cleverness of her own. Each night, she unraveled the weaving she completed by day. Waiting, in Greek mythology, is its own form of heroism. At last the gods intervened. Odysseus was allowed to return. Disguised as a beggar, he entered his own palace. He revealed himself only at the right moment. The suitors were defeated. Peace returned. Odysseus was home. And with his return, something quietly changed. The age of heroes began to fade. The world grew smaller, more human. Now, let's gently widen our view again. Greek mythology did not end with heroes. It softened. It turned inward. The gods became more distant. Stories shifted from conquest to reflection, from battle to balance. The Greeks told stories of the afterlife, the underworld ruled by Hades. Not a place of fire, but of shadows. Souls crossed the river Styx. They paid the ferryman Charon. Judgment followed. Most souls wandered quietly. A few were rewarded. Some were punished. But eternity in Greek thought was rarely dramatic. It was calm. So, much like this moment now. As myths passed into philosophy, thinkers began asking different questions. What is virtue? What is justice? What is a good life? The gods became metaphors. Stories became lessons. And slowly myth turned into memory. Yet even today these stories remain. In the names of planets, in books and films, in quiet references we barely notice. They remind us that people have always searched for meaning, for explanations, for comfort. And maybe that's why Greek mythology works so well at night. It's familiar, imperfect, human. If your thoughts are drifting now, that's exactly where they should be. You don't need to hold on to every name. Just let the rhythm carry you forward. As the age of heroes quietly faded, Greek mythology began to change its voice. The stories grew less about conquering monsters, and more about understanding limits. The gods were still there, watching from Olympus, but their presence felt softer, more symbolic, less immediate. Zeus still ruled the sky, but thunder no longer arrived for every mistake. Athena still represented wisdom, but wisdom now came from reflection rather than war. Apollo's prophecies became warnings instead of commands. The world was learning to stand on its own. One of the gentler myths from this later age is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus was a musician whose songs could calm storms and soften stone. When his wife Eurydice died from a snake's bite, Orpheus descended into the underworld. Not with weapons, not with anger, but with music. His playing moved Hades and Persephone themselves. They allowed Eurydice to return to the world of the living on one condition. Orpheus must not look back until they reached the surface. He walked ahead. He listened to her footsteps fade behind him. And just before the exit, he looked back. Eurydice vanished. The myth lingers not because it is dramatic, but because it feels human. Trust is fragile. Doubt arrives quietly. Now, let's rest there for a moment. Greek mythology often returns to that idea. That even the greatest love, the greatest strength, can be undone by a single moment of hesitation. Another quiet figure from these later myths is Narcissus. Beautiful, distant, uninterested in anyone else. When he finally noticed his reflection in a pool of water, he fell in love. Not with another person but with himself. He could not look away. And slowly he faded. The story became a warning whispered through generations. Balance matters. Connection matters. Even gods understood this in their own imperfect way. The goddess Demeter, for example, loved her daughter Persephone fiercely. When Persephone was taken into the underworld by Hades, Demeter grieved. The earth grew cold. Crops failed. Winter arrived. Only when Persephone was allowed to return part of each year did the world bloom again. Spring and summer followed her upward journey. Autumn and winter marked her return below. Greek mythology used this story to explain the seasons, but also to express loss, acceptance, and rhythm. Nothing lasts forever. But nothing is truly gone either. As centuries passed, the Greeks began telling fewer stories about divine punishments and more about moral reflection. The gods became teachers rather than rulers. Philosophers replaced prophets. Temples grew quieter. Myths became something to read, not fear. And yet, the stories remained alive. They were told to children at bedtime, shared during long evenings, carried forward in poetry. Because myths at their core are not about believing. They're about remembering. Remembering fear. Remembering hope. Remembering that people once looked at the world and filled it with meaning. Even the end of Greek mythology is not really an ending. There is no final battle. No last god falling from the sky. Just a gentle transition. The gods step back. Human voices step forward. History begins. And myth becomes a quiet companion rather than a commanding presence. So as this long story settles, you might notice how calm it feels. The chaos of the early world has softened. The wars have ended. The heroes have gone home. The gods remain. Not above us but within the stories we tell. And in moments like this, quiet, dimly lit, and unhurried, those stories still do what they were always meant to do. They keep us company. They help us rest. They remind us that before clocks, before screens, before modern noise, people sat under the same sky and wondered. And then, they slept. By now, the night has likely settled around you. The sharp edges of the day have softened. And the world feels a little farther away. This is the space where Greek mythology often returns, not loudly but quietly. Because even after heroes vanished and gods stepped back, the stories did not disappear. They learned how to whisper. The ancient Greeks believed memory itself was sacred. They even had a goddess for it, Mnemosyne, mother of the muses. From her came inspiration, poetry, music, and history. Without memory, stories fade. Without stories, meaning slips away. That's why myths were retold again and again. Not to impress, not to frighten, but to remember who they were. The Greeks spoke of the muses as gentle presences. They didn't command. They nudged. A quiet idea. A sudden image. A line of poetry arriving at just the right moment. Artists, writers, and thinkers believed creativity was something you listened for, not something you forced. And that idea feels very modern, doesn't it? Even now, inspiration often arrives when we slow down. As Greek civilization matured, myth and philosophy began to blend. Thinkers like Plato and Aristotle didn't reject the gods outright. They reinterpreted them. Zeus became order. Athena became reason. Apollo became balance and clarity. The gods shifted from personalities to principles. Stories turned into symbols. And yet, the old tales remained just beneath the surface. In rural villages, people still whispered about nymphs and forests and springs. Sailors still prayed to Poseidon before long journeys. Farmers still honored Demeter at harvest. Belief doesn't vanish overnight. It fades slowly like twilight. One of the final great mythic cycles was the story of Theseus, a hero who felt almost transitional, not fully divine, not entirely legendary. Theseus ventured into the labyrinth to face the Minotaur, a creature half man half bull. With help from Ariadne's threat, he found his way back. The story carried a quiet message. Monsters aren't always outside us. Sometimes they're confusion, fear, being lost. And sometimes all we need is a thread, a guide, to return. As Greece moved toward recorded history, myths began to settle into fixed forms. Poets like Homer and Hesiod preserved them. What had once shifted with each telling now became written. That act alone changed everything. Stories stopped evolving. They became anchors. And through them the ancient world still speaks. Even Rome, rising in power, adopted the Greek gods. They renamed them, reshaped them. But the essence remained. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera became Juno. Athena became Minerva. The myths traveled, crossed borders, and refused to disappear. And maybe that's because Greek mythology never demanded perfection. Its gods failed. Its heroes suffered. Its kings made terrible choices. It understood something timeless, that life is not neat. It's emotional, contradictory, unfinished, and that honesty is comforting. Now, let's slow even further. Imagine an ancient Greek evening. Oil lamps flicker. The sea murmurs in the distance. Someone begins telling a familiar story, not to teach but to soothe. No one rushes them. There's nowhere else to be. That same rhythm carries us now. The myths don't need endings. They loop. They return. They wait patiently for the next listener. And tonight that listener is you. So if sleep is pulling at you now, let it. The gods won't mind. They've waited centuries. They can wait a little longer. At this point in the night, the world outside feels distant. Sounds are muted. Thoughts slow down. This is where Greek mythology often settles best, not in action but in stillness. In the later centuries of ancient Greece, people no longer expected the gods to appear in storms or dreams. Instead, the gods lived in habit, in rituals, in festivals, in the rhythm of the year. Every city had its patron deity. Athens honored Athena. Sparta respected Ares. Delphi listened to Apollo. Not because the gods demanded constant attention, but because tradition offered comfort. To honor a god was to feel connected to something larger than yourself. And connection, more than power, became the quiet purpose of myth. The Oracle of Delphi remained one of the last strong voices of the old divine world. Pilgrims traveled long distances to ask questions. The priestess, speaking for Apollo, offered answers that were famously unclear. Not wrong. Not right. Just open. Know thyself. Nothing in excess. Short phrases. Long meanings. Greek mythology was learning how to let humans think for themselves. Meanwhile, stories about the afterlife became softer. No longer focused on punishment, but on rest. The asphodel meadows were imagined as quiet fields where ordinary souls wandered peacefully. No suffering. No joy, just calm existence. Even Elysium, reserved for heroes, was not loud or glorious. It was gentle. A place of ease. Greek mythology, in its final tone, leaned toward rest rather than reward. As the gods faded from daily life, humans turned inward. They told stories not about what the gods could do to them, but about what life meant. This is where myth meets philosophy. Questions replaced prayers. What makes a life good? What is happiness? What is enough? And in a quiet way, Greek mythology had already offered its answers. Balance matters. Pride invites collapse. Kindness lingers longer than strength. And above all, nothing lasts forever. Even Olympus. Temples slowly emptied. Statues weathered. Offerings stopped. But the myths did not die. They became echoes. They surfaced in dreams, in art, in language. Even now, you use their names without noticing. A titanic effort. A Herculean task. A narcissistic glance. The myths are still speaking. Just more softly. Now let's rest with one final image. Imagine Mount Olympus at night. Not glowing. Not alive with thunder. Just stone and sky. The gods are not gone. They're simply quiet. Like old storytellers who have finished speaking but remain nearby, content to listen instead. And in that silence there is peace. The chaos that began the universe has settled. The conflicts have resolved. The stories have found their place. And all that remains is rest. So if sleep has already come for you, let this be the gentle closing of the tale. And if you're still listening, know this. Greek mythology never truly ends. It drifts. It waits. It returns whenever someone, somewhere, needs a story to slow the night. That if you're still listening, you're doing exactly enough. There's nothing you need to remember. Nothing you need to imagine clearly. Just let the sound of the story be present. Greek mythology in its quietest form was never meant to be exciting. It was meant to be familiar. The ancient Greeks often repeated the same stories, not to add detail, but to smooth them, like waves returning to shore again and again. Over time, the myths became part of daily language. A mother warning her child about hubris. A sailor whispering thanks to the sea. A poet pausing before a line waiting for the muse. These moments were small. And that's what made them lasting. There were no final commands from Zeus. No great ending to the world. Instead, the gods slowly stepped into the background. They became symbols of human emotion. Ares was anger. Aphrodite was desire. Athena was clarity. Hades was acceptance. The myths didn't disappear, they transformed. And transformation in Greek thought was natural. Even the gods experienced it. Dionysus, god of wine and celebration, represented release. Not chaos but letting go. Festivals in his honor were moments where rules softened. People laughed louder. Danced longer. It wasn't about excess. It was about balance. And balance, again, returns as a quiet theme. When everything is controlled, life becomes heavy. When everything is wild, life becomes unstable. The Greeks searched for the middle path. And they told stories to remind themselves. As centuries passed, Greek myths traveled far beyond Greece. They crossed into Rome. Into Europe. Into classrooms, libraries, and quiet bedrooms. They became bedtime stories. Study material. Background knowledge. But at night, they returned to their original purpose. To slow the mind. To offer perspective. To remind the listener that humans have always wondered the same things. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens when this ends? Greek mythology never answered these questions directly. Instead, it offered companionship. And sometimes that's enough. Now, imagine the sound of a distant lyre. Not loud. Barely there. Someone is playing, not for an audience but for themselves. The music drifts. It doesn't ask for attention. It simply exists. This is how myths end. Not with silence, but with quiet continuation. They remain available. Whenever you're ready. So if sleep comes now, let it come gently. And if you're still awake, stay as long as you like. The story will wait. Be why now your breathing may have slowed. Your thoughts may be wandering between wakefulness and rest. That is exactly the space where Greek mythology thrives. Stories that once described thunder and lightning now describe patience. Stories that once detailed heroism now describe reflection. Stories that once told of monsters and war now whisper about quiet lessons. In this part of the mythology, everything is softer. The gods are calm observers. Mortals live their lives with gentle consequences. The world spins steadily like a slowly turning wheel. Even the heroes have retired. Heracles rests in Elysium. Odysseus has returned to Ithaca. Perseus and Theseus have faded into legend. And the Minotaur waits quietly, no longer pursued. Greek mythology now lingers in smaller moments. A poet walks along a quiet river, recalling Mnemosyne's wisdom. A farmer pauses during harvest to honor Demeter. A mother tells her children about the cleverness of Athena. Even the storms are calm now. The sea is gentle. The wind's soft. The myths do not vanish. They settle in the rhythm of life. They inhabit the spaces between sleep and wakefulness. Imagine yourself walking through this world. No danger. No urgency. Only stories, floating, soft and patient. And here the gods are kind. They observe, they smile quietly, and they wait. Zeus no longer wields thunder to punish. Hera watches lovingly. Apollo offers gentle light. Artemis guides quietly through the forest paths. Even chaos has softened into balance. The lessons of human experience remain. Pride, patience, love, loss, hope. All of it whispered gently, not shouted. And in these whispers, the ancient Greeks still speak to us. Their stories no longer demand action. They demand only presence. So if your eyelids feel heavy, that is the natural conclusion. Let the myths carry you as you drift. Let the voices of gods, heroes, and mortals blend into a slow, rhythmic calm. Greek mythology, in this quietest of moments, does exactly what it was always meant to do. It soothes. It comforts. It waits. And always it is patient. By now the night has settled deeply. Your surroundings are quiet. Every sound seems distant. Your body may feel heavier and your mind softer. This is the perfect space for Greek mythology's final gentle passages. The gods of Olympus, once loud and dramatic, now exist more as quiet guides. Their stories are no longer about battles or power. They are about reflection, understanding, and the subtle rhythms of life. Take Hestia, goddess of the hearth. She does not wage war. She does not seek glory. She tends the flame quietly, providing warmth and comfort. A simple, steady presence. Her story reminds us that calm consistency can be more powerful than any display of might. The heroes have long finished their quests. Odysseus sleeps peacefully in Ithaca. Heracles rests among the stars. Even the tragic figures, Orpheus, Eurydice, Oedipus, are remembered for their lessons rather than their suffering. Greek mythology at this stage becomes less about action and more about balance. Every tale has a rhythm. Every character embodies a lesson. Every myth has a heartbeat. And as we drift through this world, it's easy to notice the small, quiet wonders. The gentle wisdom of Athena, watching humanity grow and learn. The soft glow of Apollo's sun, marking time without force. The distant songs of the Muses, inspiring creation without demand. The calm, unwavering patience of Demeter, reminding us that growth follows its own rhythm. Even the monsters have softened. The Minotaur waits quietly in the labyrinth, no longer hunted. Charybdis and Scylla move in the sea with careful, measured motion. Sirens sing faintly, their songs now invitations to contemplation rather than danger. And humans, mortals, live gently alongside these figures. They remember, they create, they reflect. They honor, they rest, they dream. Greek mythology's greatest gift is patience. It teaches us that even chaos settles. Even pride softens. Even fear fades with time. And now, in this final stretch of part 9, let yourself sink a little deeper into calm. Let the rhythm of the story match the rhythm of your breath. Let the names, the places, and the soft echoes of the gods become a gentle background to your thoughts. The stories of Greek mythology are not endings. They are companions. They are steady. They are patient. And tonight they are here for you. So as your mind drifts, remember this. The tales of gods, heroes, and mortals can be soft, gentle, and comforting. They wait quietly for anyone who listens, patiently holding space as the night moves on. By now, the night is quiet. Even your thoughts have slowed. Your body feels lighter, yet deeply settled. The world outside may seem far away. This is the space where Greek mythology becomes its softest. The gods no longer demand attention. Heroes have laid down their burdens. Monsters rest in shadowed corners. The stories linger gently, like distant echoes, or faint stars in a dark sky. Consider Hades for a moment. Once feared, now calm. The underworld is no longer a place of terror. It is quiet, orderly, a place of rest. Souls move slowly, peacefully. Even in the afterlife, balance prevails. The stories of love, loss, and courage remain. They do not jolt the mind. They do not demand action. They simply exist. They exist for you. Think of Orpheus still playing soft melodies. Or Demeter watching fields grow. Think of Athena guiding gently. Think of the Muses, whispering inspiration that flows like a slow stream. Everything is calm. The chaos of the early world has settled. The drama has softened. Even fate itself pauses, taking a quiet breath. Greek mythology in this final stage teaches us patience. It reminds us that endings can be gentle. That reflection is more powerful than force. That listening is more meaningful than acting. So as you lie here, resting or slowly drifting toward sleep, allow the stories to fade softly around you. Let your mind follow the rhythm of the gods and heroes. Let your breath match the gentle unfolding of the myths. There is no rush. There is no need to remember every name. No need to follow every journey. The myths themselves carry all that weight. You only need to exist here. Quietly, calmly, patiently. And now, in these final moments, the world of Greek mythology rests with you. It surrounds you like a gentle night breeze. It lingers like a soft candle flame. It hums quietly, patiently, endlessly. Sleep, if it comes, is welcome. The stories wait. The night carries you. And Greek mythology, ever patient, ever calm, remains with you. Good night.